Hi, I'm Julie Bishop, and thank you for tuning in to the first ever episode of the IT Naturally podcast. In each episode, we're going to be talking to leaders and experts about how IT can be a force for good, both on an individual level and for the wider community. And today, I'm joined by my good friend Janine Cook, who's had an incredible career in the IT sector working for IBM. Janine, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Julie.
So today we're going to be talking about a range of topics, including the positive ways that IT has impacted Janine's own career and her life. And then we'll look at the challenges that she faced being a leader in tech and how she overcame them. And then we'll also look at how Janine thinks IT will continue to evolve and shape the world and what excites her most about the future. But first of all, I'm going to give a short summary of Janine's career to give listeners a bit more context about her and her amazing career journey. So don't blush, Janine. So Janine's had a 37-year career in the global technology company IBM. She was a vice president on the board of IBM UK, IBM Financial Services, and the British Services Organisation, which is a leading trade organisation for outsourced service providers. And in 2021, she was recognised externally as one of the top 100 most influential leaders in the UK IT industry. So we're here today to talk a bit about IT and how has working in IT had a positive influence on your life and your personal development?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question, Julie, so I need to give it some thought. But I think my immediate thoughts are the fact that I've had this privilege to literally see society change from the inside. If you think about, quite often you're not always on the inside, but I've literally seen in 37 years that change in society. I think for me, one of the biggest benefits and personal development I had is that, of course, the tech industry was way ahead at working at home. I mean, for many industries, for many people, that really only came about during COVID, where people had to work remotely. And for us, I've been doing that for probably 25 years. So I think from a very personal development, I think it enabled me to have the career I had, that the tech industry was so open to actually having flexible working, having remote working, and being mobile. So most of my team we'd deal with global people, we'd have people all over the country. So that for me had been a major thing. And I think as well, the tech industry has always been a global industry, which is what we see most industries are today, but they weren't 20 years ago. So we were communicating and working with global processes for all that time. And I think other industries have had to catch up. On a very personal level, I've also had the privilege of working with really smart, clever people, which challenges you in your own development, be it in my clients, in the private sector or in public sector. So that for me is probably the biggest thing, is that ability the tech industry enabled me. It used its own abilities to use tech remotely. Even when the very first PC came out, the laptops might have been 3 inches high, but we still could do that at home. Whereas I think other industries are really only just catching up now, and that has accelerated during COVID.
What are some of the broader societal benefits that you've witnessed from the adoption of technology in the public sector?
I think probably for me, it's about communication. So if I take the question was around public sector specifically, I think it's the fact that it makes our government, more easily accessible. So that may not be immediately visible to everybody or to UK citizens. In the time I led public sector, which was 7 years, we really did they really did make a lot of effort to make those changes. I think one example would be, it sounds really simple, but it's actually very important, particularly for those who are not tech savvy, that you only have one login to the government. So you can log in to gov.uk, which is run by Government Digital Services, and that was your one. You only now only have one password to the government. That is quite a big deal, particularly to be inclusive around technology. I'll give you a really good example. A simple one, which you may have even experienced, is the passports and DVLA. So your driving license has the same photo as your passport. They're all simple things, but it's all about connectivity and accessibility to government services. I mean, I'm not fitting in that bracket and I've never experienced it, but if you really are trying to access things like even to register a death online now is a lot easier. And that's at a time of need for citizens when you're at your worst and you're most vulnerable, then having that accessibility to government. So I think that's sort of
Brilliant.
my biggest takeaway is accessibility.
So I use that password to pay tax, so I probably don't appreciate that password as much as I should, because every time
Yes,
I
that's
log
true.
in,
That's the negative side.
it seems to be when I have to pay a tax bill. But that's really, really interesting and really, yeah, good to know. And I've certainly experienced the photograph thing on the DVLA and passport. And building on that, in your experience, what steps can organisations take to ensure IT solutions are truly inclusive and beneficial for all, rather than leaving certain communities behind?
I think, again, that depends what the organisation is and what they're trying to achieve with their IT solutions. I do think I might answer this in a different way than you could be expecting me to. I think it's not always about technology. I think it's around technology solutions, thinking outside of the box, because they cannot, or you cannot. I'm trying to think of an example. An example would be a bank. Banks have apps quite evolved. We're all using different challenger banks apps, but they can't actually cater for everybody. So what they have got to do is think outside the box. It's not always a technology answer, or it's a lesser technology answer. I'll give you a perfect example this week, actually. Come into my head. My dad is partially blind now, so he cannot use the app. He could make some serious mistakes, transferring 12,000 instead of £12 or something. But his bank has actually set up a dedicated line for disabilities, and I think for over 65s. So it's not always that the IT solution, you can't create an IT solution to be fully inclusive, but as part of that IT solution design, you have to think outside of the box on how else can you fill those gaps without it being too onerous, because you can't ask everything of an IT solution. That would probably a different answer than you expected, as in,
Yeah,
it's not always about technology. It could be more basic technology, like you have to service a call desk with a phone.
absolutely. No, it's key, and I'm very pleased. My mother uses telephone banking as well, because yes, online banking was not going to work for her. But she did have some people try to phone her up and try to encourage her to give her passwords, and they were Microsoft security, so she tried to give them the answers, but luckily couldn't.
And I think, and by the way, building on what you've just said about, fraud, if we think about fraud and inclusivity, that's why I think it's not just about building IT solutions that are inclusive, but it's also thinking about how people can be scammed. So it's a
Definitely.
holistic thing around when you develop a solution. It's about alternative measures that aren't always obvious, like not an app, use a telephone, but it's also then making people aware and making it simple for them to use that app that they know. I mean, too often now, I think we get too much different types of security. So there's no consistency. I've had recent examples where one channel through, this was actually a bank as well, but one channel they use one type of ID and password, and the other channel they use a different ID and password. And that means we get confusion, and therefore the user is open to scamming. So I think even things like that in design of IT solutions is really important to think as well as part of your service to your customer is how can it be got around. That simplicity of the access is really important.
And talking about that scamming and challenges, from your perspective, how can we mitigate or overcome the challenges and potential threats posed from new technologies like AI?
I think, well, I'd like to think AI is actually an opportunity rather than a threat. I think we can't, I mean, there's so much debate around regulation around AI. I mean, only this week we've had every newspaper with a cover on it around creative IP not being paid for by some of the big AI, like ChatGPTs of the world. So I think we need some form of regulation around AI. So that's the concern, is we have regulation. But I do think if you over-regulate, we won't get the benefits of AI, particularly as a UK economy. We do have to, I think we've got great digital skills and I think they should be used. I did have the wonderful opportunity to go with the CBI leadership program to Beijing in 2019, so quite a while ago now, just pre-COVID. But what I learned there more than anything, particularly as they're much more advanced in the use of biometrics, was about, they don't have any regulation, so they're the extreme. But what you do learn in there, though, is that it just comes endemic. People are used to using biometrics. I'm using biometrics as a similar example to AI. But when it's endemic, people don't feel uncomfortable about using AI or biometric. But what people do want, though, is to be able to, you can fail much quicker in doing things if everyone's embraced it. So I think as a country, we need to embrace AI. I know other countries are really investing, like Germany, and perhaps we're not investing quite so much. So whilst I see there is threats of AI, particularly in certain segments that we have to regulate, vulnerable people, young people, and then we also things like the creative IP value we need to regulate. But I'm more keen for us to totally embrace it. And I think we see that with younger people, particularly now. The whole world has changed, that they're writing their CVs through ChatGPT, but that does 80% of the work, but then they've got to build on that and put their personalisation on it, rather than, otherwise everyone's going to have the same CV. But at least the basic has been done through technology, and then you put your own stamp on it using your own thoughts with whatever the answer ChatGPT has given you.
And how can we encourage young talent, those same youngsters, to see IT as a career opportunity? Because it is a struggle getting youngsters into IT, and certainly getting some groups of youngsters, it's really hard to get them to see IT as a career, but also to see it as a platform for social impact.
This is one of my pet topics, and despite being retired, I still want to make an impact in this kind of part of our society. I'll give you a couple of examples of experiences I've had. I have regularly gone to a further education college where less academic children go and study between 16 and 18, because it's now mandatory to do that. And when you actually talk to them about technology, of course, they think computer science. They do not think it's the technologies, the phone that they're using, TikTok they're using, or the gaming platform they're using. And unfortunately, I do think, and I have personally had the opportunity to tell an education minister this, that the renaming of some of our formal education, things we used to have ICT as a qualification, then it got renamed and repurposed to be computer science. And I think that frightened and dissuaded a lot of young people to do that. So I was part of a committee of 12 different people across industry to talk to the education minister, because they had halved the numbers from ICT to computer science. And we came up with the idea that we wanted to lobby, so this was actually 5 years ago, to lobby to call it digital communications, because then young people would know what technology is. Because too many people think you have to be a mathematician. Because actually, a child who's not that academic but is a brilliant gamer could still become a cybersecurity expert, because that's all it is. That's creating games for people. You create scenarios for people to hack. So in that sense, we haven't helped in society by calling it that. So I'd like to think that more of us in technology do go out and talk to young people, and I mean young people, I mean very young, because actually technology is endemic in everything we do today. Literally everything, from a hairdresser to a plumber to anybody and everybody is using tech every day. But we seem to have swung to the other side, think you have to be an expert mathematician or a programmer to be in tech. And also technology today is all about marketing and social media and influencing. It's not about, someone coming up and designing a mainframe computer solution. So it's the application of technology. But that word tech frightens people, which is why we came up with this brilliant idea. And there were really big companies around the table to call it digital communications. But unfortunately, that hasn't happened. It's still computer science. So I think that's how I think we encourage. We have to go way, way back to probably primary school, entry into secondary school, for people to see technology is exciting. It is the future. And I think our younger people, particularly today, are much more worried about climate change. Well, climate change could get literally aided and I won't say accelerated, it's the negative accelerated, stalled by the use of technology. So if you want to make a difference in the world, you need to go into technology, be it a marketeer, an influencer. You don't have to be a techie guru, geeky guru even. I'm quite happy being called a geek, and I know you are, Julie.
Yes.
Not everyone is.
I used to love being a coder, but I just wasn't very good at it, which is why I had to go into management. So throughout your career, or throughout the timing of our careers, you've witnessed so many waves of technological change, from very, very early computing, blooming mobile phones, PCs, all that sort of stuff. And now we're at AI. What developments do you feel have had the most profound effect on society?
Probably going to go back to my roots. I joined IBM as a graduate. I left as a board member. I'm always going to go back to IBM, I'm afraid, and that is the mainframe. I know that might be shocking to people, but if you actually look at the mainframe, is still, I believe, well, it was recent. Last I knew, 50% of high street banks, airlines, and supermarkets. But what that fast, secure transaction processing gave was the birth of cloud. And then, of course, IBM also started personal computing, so with the PC and then laptops. So if I have to say, for me personally, if I have to think of what the biggest technology change, it was actually originally the mainframe. Then we get to personal computing, and then, of course, we get to the plethora of cloud today. And it's just a given, it was the internet. But I mean, effectively, the internet needed the compute power of a mainframe in the beginning. So I'm going to say the mainframe.
Thank you. I think you'll probably be the only person that will say that when I ask that question. So it's really good. It's really good to get a different perspective. And how do you stay engaged with technology and the tech community now?
I think I've got more. I'm a very curious person. I think if you are in technology, you have to be curious because it is all about change. And nothing I did 30, 40 years ago this year is the same as it was today. So I'm always quite curious. So I do read a lot. I was a curator at TEDx Kingston. I love TED Talks. So I do often spend 20 minutes looking at a topic. Then I also still have a big network of friends in the IT industry. Vast majority of my friends are in the IT industry. So I do hear, from the ground what's going on in technology. But then I would also say it's all about use of social media. So I do follow people that are influencers in the tech industry on whatever social media platform, which again, that's changed. 10 years ago, I wouldn't have been doing that, but now you've got some really good insights. So I actually have more time now to stay up to date with technology outside of my IBM experience. So that's even better. So I do know more about the wider tech industry than I did, probably.
Which is a bit ironic, isn't it? But it's
true.
It's the way it works. Can you think of a story or a time when you had a memorable partnership or a collaboration with another company or a person that stands out?
I know the answer to that one very quickly. It was started on March the 23rd, 2020. That was during COVID. I don't think I'm ever going to witness, well, I won't because I'm not in the corporate world anymore, but the collaboration between us and our competitors was like nothing I'd seen in the previous 35 years of my career. So I was having calls late at night with some of our major competitors, how we work together. I think it was on three fronts, really. It was on procurement. So us agreeing with government that we would change our procurement processes and they would change theirs. So they could do very fast access to new contracts. It was about insights, data insights. So things under NDA we can't talk about with government, that we did actually share data with some of our and then it was risk taking. Personally, I had to take risks. I didn't always ask for approval, that perhaps I would have done, of our global colleagues, because at the end of the day, I thought it was life and death, so we all took more risks. I can remember literally 11 o'clock at night, Easter weekend 2020, being on a call with 3 competitors, 4 of us, all on a conference call late in the evening, all trying, even though we don't even make or sell laptops anymore, trying to find sources and ways to provide laptops into the NHS. So that has to be the best collaboration. And I'd like to think we all learnt from that. I think there are lots of trade associations like Tech UK, like British Services Association, that have continued that. How do we collaborate better for good, particularly around the NHS? So yeah, I think that was my best experience. And it was amazing to witness. Very hard work, but amazing to see everyone gathered together under the same purpose. It's very powerful.
And I remember so clearly during that time that both you and I were working unbelievably crazy hours. It was an incredible time. And then some of our friends were saying, has anyone got another jigsaw puzzle? I've run out of jigsaw.
Yeah, or their sock drawer was organised.
What's a jigsaw? We don't know what a jigsaw is. It was a very strange time across the world where people lived these extremes, didn't they? That we did. And yes, the collaboration, I found that in my career as well. And sometimes I'd be asking people to put a system, go live on a Saturday night and work through the Saturday night. And I'd say, do you mind? And they go, well, what the heck else am I going to be doing on a Saturday night during COVID? I might as well be working. It was a very, very strange time, but very exciting time in some ways. What's the strangest thing that's ever happened to you in your career in IT?
I'm going to answer it 2 parts. I think on a personal level, the strangest thing is an opportunity I had that IBM supported a charity which was to build houses in KwaZulu-Natal, and they decided that 20 women would go on behalf of IBM to build houses. So I was in the middle of a shanty town, 5 hours from Joburg, with 19 female colleagues across Europe, building, literally making cement and building. But again, it just showed the breadth of technology, not technology itself, but the tech companies' forward thinking around things like diversity and influence that they had. So that just standing in there thinking that was strange. That's rather odd. What am I doing here? But from a work point of view, I still think my maddest moment was in a queue in Waitrose and the tills going down. And at the time, I was head of retail for IBM. Waitrose, where I live in Kingston, doesn't have any signal in it, or it didn't then. It was a long time ago. We didn't have smartphones then. And then I'm in the queue on a Sunday morning, and tills go down, and I literally have no idea why the tills have gone down. You know, particularly, I knew what we did for Waitrose, so I'm not like thinking it's our issue. Anyway, we all in the end disband in our baskets. We leave Waitrose. As soon as I get out, I've got literally loads of calls. And basically, as a partner to Waitrose and John Lewis, they asked us to help. So we were then on calls every hour for the next 36 hours with the CIO, John Lewis, and Waitrose to help solve that problem. Part of it was around retail. Other parts were around data. Let's call it a data issue. So that was strange, that I was personally impacted by an IT problem, didn't know it was us, sitting there almost complaining, but it does have an impact on people. But yeah, that was very strange that you're personally impacted by it. Yeah.
Thank you. So Janine, where do you see technology going in the next 5 years?
Well, I think the biggest thing we'll see, and there's lots of people in the race for this, will be quantum computing. So it's not always talked about. It's never quite as sexy as AI is at the moment. Let's commentary from me, but when I left IBM, I really did feel the biggest change in society would be that. And that would be around just the speed you can compute algorithms and data that we've never seen before. And I do think that is genuinely going to help with things like drug discovery. Us getting a cure to cancer, one of the issues is, how the chemical reactions, the drug reactions, how you compute that quick enough. I think it would be also around sustainability and technology and how we test things on energy reactions, things like that. Even simple things like around climate change, around weather forecasting. So how do we preempt some of the things that are happening and the geographical impacts of that? And I also think quantum has negatives too. It could break all the security codes, right? So that's always the risk. I think that I'm actually watching an Apple TV series called Prime Target, which is literally about that at the moment. But they've got a maths genius trying to do that. Was actually in reality what you need is a quantum computer. So I think the race to quantum is probably the biggest thing in the next 5 years. And I think it is that 5-year period that we will see that. And whoever cracks that is going to have a very big influence in society and the impact of it. But I think as society, we do care about climate change, we do care about healthcare, and that's needed for that is quantum. So that's what I would say.
Janine, thank you so much for joining us on our first ever podcast. It's been really brilliant to hear your thoughts. It's incredible to think the impact that you've had in your career on so many major parts of the UK, on supporting the NHS and wider than that, I know during COVID, to making sure that I can buy my shopping in Kingston. But thank you so much. It's been really good fun. Really enjoyed talking to you.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you, Julie.